Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Hope you're having a fantastic day. As I mentioned on a previous video, I'm not sure if that one's up before this one or not. Lin Dunn was recently interviewed, Indiana Fever GM, recently interviewed on the Locked On Women's Basketball podcast. And there are some things we're going to talk about. I got a couple of segments from this I want to listen to, and we'll kind of talk about what is Lin Dunn talking about? What does she mean by this? What does this mean for the Indiana Fever going forward? So, right now, I've got this set up. She's going to talk a little bit about Caitlin Clark and her coming into the league and the start that the Fever had and how that has progressed. So, let's dig into this a little bit.
I think, how did we go from struggling early to where we are today with those statistics? And it takes time. People don't understand that growth takes time. And so over a period of time, Caitlin Clark had to adjust to the physicality of the league. She had to adjust that she was going to be guarded every night by everybody's number one toughest defender. I mean, look who's guarded her: Copper, Benijah Laney, Carrington.
Now, I just like to point out, and this actually isn't really specific to Lin Dunn, but what I found interesting is what about all that talk about her coming into the league? And I think the most notable names are, say, Diana Taurasi or Gino Ariema, UConn coach, about how she wasn't built for the league. She wasn't going to be able to handle the physicality of the league. Her skills, her game from Iowa was not going to translate to the WNBA. If that were true, why are teams' number one defenders on her? Why are players guarding her all 94 feet of the court? Why are they so fixated on face guarding Caitlin Clark that they're literally running over to her and getting into her face between their own free throws? Okay, just had to remind everyone about that. Let's keep going.
Whoever your toppest guard, defensive guard is, they're going to be all over Clark from the get-go, not to mention the traps and the double teams and the switches. And so it was a learning curve for her. And I am very impressed with how she grew through that period of time and became very mentally and physically tough with the things that were thrown at her. And then during that period of time, she and Boston are learning how to play together. And then also, Kelsey Mitchell is learning how to benefit from the fact that Caitlin now has the number one defender on her, and the number 2 or 3 defender is on her instead of the number one. And so that's creating opportunities for her to get open that she hasn't had a lot of in the past. And so it's just a growth process that takes time and that takes patience. And so I think where we are right now is exactly the type goals that we had. It was get better. Can we get better?
Okay, so what bothered me about this? Well, first, let me just say, in a vacuum, I don't really have a problem with what Lin Dunn is saying here. Players who haven't played together before, especially when you're playing with a completely different player like a Caitlin Clark. Right? It's like playing with Michael Jordan for the first time. And no, I'm not equating the two. I'm just talking about what they brought to the game that was very different. Caitlin Clark is a very different player than what anybody in the WNBA is used to playing with as a teammate. And so, absolutely, in terms of the players themselves, whether it's Aaliyah Boston or Kelsey Mitchell or Nalissa Smith or whomever else it might be, and vice versa, Caitlin Clark as well. When you're playing together for the first time, you absolutely are having to learn how to play together because you're learning each other's tendencies, their strengths, what it is they want to do, what it is they want to avoid, how they're going to react to certain situations and certain plays. And so that is 100% true. What I have an issue with and we're going to dig into that a little more in the one other clip that I have for this, is how she led into that with it's Caitlin Clark had to learn this, and Caitlin Clark had to learn that, and Caitlin Clark had to adjust to this, and Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston had to figure these things out with the pick and roll and so on and so forth. And all true to a degree. But you have a young team, as we keep hearing. I believe Aaliyah Boston is a month older. She played last year. She was This is only her second year. She was a rookie last year, but she's also only a month older than Caitlin Clark. This is a young basketball team overall. That's what we keep hearing. I don't hear anything. And by the way, I watched this whole half hour episode. Well, there is I shouldn't say there's nothing about Christy Sides. There is, but not to specifically to what I'm talking about here. There's nothing in this about the coach helping with that and the coach's role and what the coach needs to do and how the coach needed to help these players get through this and to help these players adjust and to coach them on what to do in these given situations. And to that point, she goes in that to that a little more in this one, specific to the team. So we'll listen to this and then we'll talk a little bit about this one as well and what that means for the Fever going forward.
So I think that's going to be a key because she makes everybody better. She makes Aaliyah better when they work together in the pick and roll, the pick and pop, the pick and whatever action they're doing. That
Whatever action they're doing. And you know what? Now you know why Christy Sides is the coach, because Christy Sides doesn't know what they're doing either. Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark have figured it out on their own. They have worked together and figured this out, and they have learned to play together extremely well. And again, one thing I will point out, because you've seen me show it actually in multiple videos, because I kept being able to discover different angles to show it because it was so amazing overall, was that play in the All-Star game where Caitlin Clark was covered 94 feet by Kelsey Plum. And as great as the pass is from Caitlin Clark, and it is phenomenal, it's also that whole play is also just as dependent on Aaliyah Boston. Aaliyah Boston was able to bring the ball up the court. Aaliyah Boston was able to recognize when Kelsey Plum turned to her that Caitlin Clark was breaking away to get open, and Aaliyah Boston got her the ball right away. And then Aaliyah Boston went right to the pinned Kelsey Plum behind her and went straight to the basket. And there was a lot of skill and basketball IQ by Aaliyah Boston in that play as well. And they have learned to work together extremely, extremely well. Okay, let's keep going.
that's so beautiful. And she makes Kelsey better. She makes everybody better. And so that's the direction we go now. Okay, how
Now, there it is. Before we get into this next part, I just want to say that's so important that a lot of people seem to want to ignore is even if Caitlin Clark is not having a phenomenal game, Caitlin Clark is one of those rare players that makes everyone around her better just by being on the court, and that cannot be overstated.
do we continue to grow? And how do we get better in two areas that I think we need to grow in? And that's defensively, we need to continue to get better. We still need to grow our knowledge of our special situations. Let's make sure that we're really functioning at a high level in all those areas. So special situation and defense would be the two areas I'd say we've really got to grow over the break.
Okay. Now, this to me, I don't think Lin Dunn meant it this way because she's a huge Christy Side supporter, but this is a huge, huge admission about the coaching staff, about Christy Sides. Christy Sides, as we've been told over and over again, is a defensive specialist. Now she's talking about special situations. And again, ultimately, things are on players, right? Players have to execute, players have to play well defensively, they have to do their jobs, they have to make smart decisions in special situations. I'll give you one that just popped into my head that I don't even really remember it other than it's one of those things that when you hear about it, just sort of has stuck with me, even though I, I, I can sort of picture the play in my head. This is going way, way back when Michigan had their Fab Five, and you had Chris Webber calling a timeout at the end of the game against, I believe, North Carolina in the final. See what I mean about not necessarily remembering all the final? It was either the final four or the championship game, and he called a timeout, but you had no timeouts. Now, I don't know for sure if at the last dead ball the coach made sure that the players knew that, but ultimately, as a player, you have to know that. Now, that being said, we keep getting told Christy Sides is the defensive specialist. I've broken down a little bit about the defense in the past, and while they have some individual player issues that need to be worked on, Caitlin Clark, I'm still waiting to hear from you, by the way, because I'm sorry, but your defensive stance is atrocious. You clearly don't have a coach who knows how to teach that, and maybe you don't have the leg strength to do it properly. Please reach out. I want to fix that for you. It's got to get fixed. That being said, back to our regularly scheduled program. There are a lot of issues with the team defense, and it seemed like the players don't necessarily know their roles, and that's on the coach. The Fever coach is supposedly a defensive specialist. Special situations, you're talking about, right after a timeout, you know, things like fouling or not fouling at the end of the game with regard to the shot clock if you're losing, and do you play defense to force a bad shot, or do you foul early, all those types of things. Again, coaching, that is coaching, that is coaching, that is coaching. But she doesn't make any mention of the coach, yet the things that she say are the two biggest issues are coaching. And again, ultimately, the defense is players, but as we've seen in the past in games, the players don't seem to have a real grasp as to what the defensive system is, and that's a coach. And whenever it's brought out about the defense, Christy Sides just says that we have to get better. I do believe once she even said that's on me, which is the first I ever heard. But there's we have to get better. All right, I think that might be it. But I'm going to play this a little bit more just to see if there was something else that I wanted to make note of.
It's interesting. You talk about how much she makes everyone better. And during that 15 game span, you guys are fourth in the lead in true.
Okay, yeah, that was it because this was kind of a long question that went on to another topic. So I'm just going to leave it there for now. But I thought that was really interesting, those bits, because the coach was not mentioned in either one of them. And yet, for me, in watching this team, so much of that was about the coach. And yet, Lin Dunn is a huge Christy Sides supporter. Clearly, Christy Sides is going to be here for the rest of the season at least. So that's not going to change. So what does that mean for the Fever? To me, that limits their ceiling for this season as to what they're going to do, where they're going to get to. So how much of that can the players overcome? And it goes to their offense too, right? We've talked about this. How much are they going to get out in the court and run? Because that's their bread and butter. Or is Chrissy Sides going to slow it down to get touches in the paint because that's her thing? How much of Caitlin Clark is Christy Sides going to allow to flourish on the basketball court, which helps everyone else? We don't have the answers to that. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help out a lot, and I do appreciate it. And I will talk to you later.